So the next segment we'll be talking about is multiple choice exams. So I would like to motivate some key discussion questions for you. So first of all, you know, in no particular order, describe your experience administering remote proctor and or unproctored multiple choice exams. And which online platforms do you use for your remote multiple choice tests? And I'll open it up for anybody who is interested in sharing their experiences. Not at the same time. Hold on. Okay, relax. Relax. Okay, so
I can start, Frank.
Okay, so Tina and then Alicia. So Tina, go ahead.
Okay, so the city of Los Angeles, about 3 years ago, we started online testing through remote proctoring. The first year was basically a pilot. We wanted to achieve testing this way for 1,000 candidates. And after a lot of growing pains and getting all the logistics together and who does what and all that stuff, and you know, and then later on when we were successful, we got additional funding to add more staff. As you can imagine, the online testing component brings about a lot of challenges in terms of working with vendors, making sure the contracts are together, integrating their system with our testing platform. So there was a lot of UAT testing, user acceptance testing that we did, a lot of time involved. We had, you know, people, staff who are doing their regular work, plus doing this extra research to get this going. So there was a lot of growing pains. So the first year we did pilot testing, it was, it appeared to be fairly successful. And then the next year we targeted inviting 16,000 people, which we did. We learned that there is a lot of resistance in the city of LA in terms of our candidate pool. Not so much with our entry-level candidates that are coming, that want to join the city, but mostly by our promotional candidates who were used to the old way, paper and pencil. And what we typically did was we tested at the LA high schools over here and also in our personnel building. We have a testing center there too. But basically they were used to doing it because we've been doing it forever, paper and pencil. And what we had to do was develop a system where we can have people self-schedule themselves for on-site testing if they chose not to do online testing, and then figure out in our calendar how to put them through that, making sure that the online testing coincide with the on-site testing, and then proctoring that piece, and then who was going to review the videos. So our vendor, PSI, actually was on board, and they reviewed our videos. There's two types of remote proctoring that they offer. One is record and review. The other is basically live proctoring. The record and review was the function that we decided to use for this vendor. The live proctoring is it's good, but anyway, there was a cost involved in integrating either piece, so we decided to do the record and review piece so that we can look at any flag videos that resulted from the online testing later on. And so we decided who in our staff would do the first level review, and then we determined that there needs to be a second level review. And so a lot of logistics was involved in developing who does what, and how do we end up with a process where we ensure the integrity of this, you know, civil service process, basically. We wanted to make sure that people who were actually cheating actually got disqualified from the test. We have actual civil service rules which require us to basically go through certain steps and disqualify individuals. We actually can preclude them from taking another test, and that's the harshest penalty, is preclude them from taking another test. So there was a lot of things involved in not only the logistics, but also how do we apply our rules? How do we review the videos and say, this is cheating, this is not? You know, there's funny scenarios that happen when people, you know, leave the room or have other people in the room taking the test. So we had to come together and build pretty much like parameters. This is never before done before. So we had to like meet often during the, I would say the first year and second year, just to kind of iron these things out. Just the devil's in the details in multiple choice testing online. We also considered the option of just giving a test online and not giving an on-site test, but there's, you know, all kinds of EEO issues related to that too, because, you know, what if, you know, someone doesn't have the equipment? What if, you know, they just simply can't do it without a proctor present? So those are kind of the things that the thought and the processes we went through to develop our system. Steve, did you want to add anything to that?
I know people are curious. So we do use NeoGov, and through NeoGov, we use Fast Test Web as our test management system. Tina mentioned that we use PSI as one of our remote proctoring vendors. We are in the works to also get Examity and ProctorU on board. So those will be the other vendors that will be providing remote proctoring. Well, like Tina mentioned, right now we're just doing record and review. But we do plan on using live launch in the future. That's a feature that Examity has, where there's someone there live walking you through the beginning of the process, and then you get recorded as you take the test. And then there is the integration that we will work on with PSI to do the live proctoring throughout. I think other than that, Tina had mentioned a lot of the growing pains that we've had. I would say the resistance is more so from the promotional candidates. You may be wondering, are certain job classes more resistant? Is there a demographic issue? Is there an age issue? We're actually doing some analysis on that, but what jumps at us most is it's really just the promotional candidates. We do have satisfaction surveys for our customers, our candidates, and although on-site proctoring is a little more favorable on a scale of 1 to 5, usually on-site is somewhere around 4.64 in terms of their overall positive experience, and remotely it's about a 4.24. So not big of a difference in both positive. The other thing I'll mention is in terms of the candidates themselves, where we're happy with is that the people who are choosing on-site, when we ask them why they chose on-site, the majority of it is because I'm used to doing it in person, and not that I don't have the equipment. Although that's still a small percentage, I'm glad that that's lower than the other ones, because that tells me that hopefully in the future we can potentially go more so just remotely. One other question that we get is, what's the percentage, meaning remote and on-site? I would say it's 55% of our candidates overall are choosing to be tested on-site. 45% are choosing to do it remotely. And one last thing before I turn it over to the panel, not to hog up time, is Tina did mention that we do have a system for self-scheduling those people who do it on site. The system that we currently use is Appointment Plus, and we made that work for us. So we do have the capacity to test 70 people in our test center per administration. And one of the things that we try to get creative with is allowing testing throughout the day. So we usually have up to 4 sessions a day with an evening session included in.
Great. I appreciate this information. Alicia, I would like to get your insight as well.
Great, thank you. So in Contra Costa County, we were actually trying to move towards online unproctored exams before all of this began. And we actually, in fact, just launched our first clerical exam online unproctored in March, which was a huge success. So we have been using eSkill for our testing platform. I wouldn't say we use it for the item bank, but we do use it because the contract actually allows us more freely to test unlimited at a lower cost than it would if we were using fast tests. I have used fast tests in the past and really loved all of the features that you could use to help design the test administration, but for eSkill works for us better in Contra Costa County right now. We also work with, I mentioned earlier, IOPredict in developing some exams for some of our classifications within Contra Costa County, and some of those have been unproctored testing online, and they utilize fast tests for their platform. So I'm familiar with that. For us, our goal is to get most of our classifications online unproctored. We are not using any proctoring software like ProctorU or some of the other ones that were mentioned, PSI. The way we develop our tests is we try to develop questions that are not going to be easily Googleable. So we're not using a bunch of knowledge-based questions. We sort of gear more towards drafting questions that are situational judgment type, reading comprehension, or something that would be applying knowledge rather than just reciting something from memory or something that you can Google online within 3 seconds. So that's kind of how we're developing our questions, so that it's really hard for candidates, if they do spend time trying to Google an answer or find out some information about how to respond to the question, that they're going to end up wasting a lot of their time and they won't be able to finish the exam within the time constraints that we've set for that test. Some of the things that we do to ensure candidates won't have enough time to cheat is, one, like any exam, we have time constraints, and we do assess what that should be based on the fact that we are administering it online. So it might, it's enough time for them to answer all of the questions, but not enough time for them to do any research or anything online. Additionally, when they get the link to the test, it's a unique link that they can only access one time. And when they open that link, they have to finish the exam within that time frame. They can't close the link, close the test, and come back to it at a later time to finish. I wanted to bring up that, I thank you, Tina, for bringing up some of the resistance that you have had with your internal candidates. Thankfully, within Contra Costa County, our candidates are actually really appreciating this process of doing online testing because of the flexibility that it gives them. Usually what we'll do is we'll give candidates about 7 days, so they have time to either take it during the week after work or over the weekend. And they really appreciate that flexibility. The resistance that we have been getting in Contra Costa County has actually been with our hiring managers and our subject matter experts. They're really, really concerned about cheating on the test, but we just try to reassure them that, you know, research suggests that most people, when they're taking tests online, are not actually cheating. There's a lot of research that supports that. And so we try to reassure them and just, you know, let them know that the way that we're developing these tests, they're not going to be able to Google the answer as well. And so while we're in our subject matter expert meetings, developing test items, a lot of times I will have them pick up their phone and say, okay, why don't you try to Google this and let's see how long it takes. So we can kind of capture whether or not this is really something that a candidate would be able to find online easily or not. Let's see, there was something else I wanted to mention. In terms of equipment, that was also brought up. I wanted to mention that in Contra Costa County, we have not had any issues with candidates not having the equipment that they need to take the exam. Like I said, we just recently had a huge clerical recruitment that we did an online and proctored test. Most of the candidates took the exam. The no-show rate was really low. And we only had one candidate who had a request for extra time on the test. So we did have that person, this was before COVID-19, we had that person come in to the test and administered the exam with extra time in our computer lab. But moving forward in the future, we will just adjust the amount of time for the test in the exam link itself and give them a unique link with the amount of time that they need based on the reasonable accommodation request form. We also have a list of public computer labs, which I don't know if they'd be even open right now, in Contra Costa County that candidates can access when we are administering online and proctored exams. So if they don't have that space at home or that equipment at home, that they can access one of those public computer labs. So just wanted to bring that up as well. I think I covered everything I wanted to talk about.
All right, Jeremiah, did you raise your hand? Thank you, Alicia.
I did. So County of Los Angeles, we've been doing unproctored tests now for a little over 8 years. Like Alicia, these aren't a lot of job knowledge tests. These aren't tests where we're concerned that cheating could be taking place. We work with our vendor SHL to integrate with NeoGov. So we have a large number of candidates, County of Los Angeles, and once they take the test in the designated time, test data gets uploaded into NeoGov. That's great. But remote proctoring for tests where we have to assess job knowledge or some other primarily cognitive-based evaluation. This is something that we are just starting out with. We're finalizing a contract right now with a remote proctor vendor, but we're also working on developing all of our instructions, our parameters, and actually having examination proctors sit there with the individual web-based while they take the test. So this involves being able to provide the candidates instructions, everything from you need to consent to being recorded, you need to ensure that you're in a secure room, controlled environment, no other individuals in the room, no other test material in the room. We still are doing what we can to kind of control the test environment, albeit via the web. And then, yeah, Josh, do you have anything to add?
I think, we, like Jeremiah was saying, we're just at the beginning of doing remote proctoring. But in terms of our unproctored testing, we have been doing that for almost 10 years now with SHL. And I think the reason that it works is because the tests that are designed use two methods. One is adaptive testing. So if you're not familiar with adaptive testing, basically the test is unique to each user who takes it. And depending on their ability, questions will be delivered to the candidate, in that order. So if you're doing well in the test, you're going to keep getting harder questions until a point where the system is reliable in determining what your ability level is. And so I think that kind of combats the issue of cheating. We can never get away from the fact that somebody isn't who's sitting at the desk until we institute, remote proctoring, right? Where they have to have a video feed on them while they're taking the test. But in essence, the actual modality of the test or the test type of content is what's helping us continue unproctored testing. County also institutes what's, in the industry referred to as personality testing. We try to stay away from that because it's sometimes has a negative connotation. But so the tests are developed to look at personal characteristics and work attitudes and behaviors that have been predictive of success, specifically at certain job levels. And so we leverage a lot of that testing to be able to be efficient with our unproctored testing, streamline exam cycle times. And luckily for us, because we do have those, those assessments at our disposal with our vendor, it's helping us in the current environment.
Thank you. And Jonathan, would you like to add anything?
Sure. Obviously, it's a different perspective, not being actually at an organization that's conducting the testing. I just share a couple of things that we're looking at. For a number of years now, we've had online testing, but it is proctored in a controlled environment for our customers, where they actually have the candidates come in instead of doing pencil and paper testing. They sit them down at the computer and they're actually going through the exam on the computer, which is online, but with a proctor there. We've lately been looking at moving in a different direction towards unproctored or remote proctored acting. And we've been looking at and trying to do some interest in creating kind of a subset where we would have specific exams, mostly at the kind of entry screener level for our customers, to use those exams where we're not as concerned at, as we would be with other exams, as far as the material being compromised as much. So we would supply that in a specific or unproctored area, I guess you could have the website, have those available to customers to pick from that specific kind of unproctored, if you will, unproctored item bank, allow them to make their own test so it is unique to the agency, and then out for them to offer those in an unproctored setting. We're also in a very preliminary, do stress very talks with ProctorU as well, to just kind of get some more information on that, to see if there's a possibility of working with them and taking our existing online test system to be remotely proctored and allow that, so it's a little bit easier to use for candidates to install and use on their home computers. We developed a Chromebook app, which is currently used in the proctored setting for our online testing. We're also creating a Windows 10 app right now, so it actually be kind of user-friendly. And then we would use those to have the candidates install those apps on their own computer, and then partner with ProctorU or a similar vendor then to do the remote proctoring of some of the testing. So those are some of the things that we're kind of looking at right now for future plans.
Thank you all of you for sharing your responses. We've been getting a lot of questions about cheating, about proctored versus unproctored. How do you verify if that's the person that took the test? I think we tried our best to really address these key concerns. Joan indicated about about equity issues as well. If people may not have the computer resources, especially under these circumstances, so like under normal circumstances, they can just come into the office, like let's say use a computer, but under these type of circumstances, having access to a computer, things like that, that could be challenging for some people. I'm just want to let you know that it's very challenging to address every single of all of your questions. We'll try our best, maybe afterwards, provide some kind of informational page that we can send to all of you that can address all of these questions. Unfortunately, we have very limited time, so we're going to try our best to address everybody's questions and just move forward with the webinar and the roundtable. But in case we don't, we'll try and at least address them at a later time as well. So I'd like to, yeah, Alicia, do you want to say something?
Yeah, I just wanted to add something really quickly. Whenever we are using online unproctored tests as the only hurdle that a candidate is going through, we will have conversations with the hiring managers to let them know that that's the method that we used and which competencies we measured, so that they can do during the interview process, the hiring interview, they can just validate some of that information by asking follow-up questions about certain areas, and even doing some of their own testing on site too.
Great, thank you for that. So I would like to transition to the next segment of the roundtable, and this is performance exams. So I'd like to motivate some key discussion questions, at least motivate discussion with you. So here are the questions. So what type of remote proctored or unproctored performance exams do you administer? And describe your experience administering such remote performance exams. And also, which online platforms do you use for remote performance exams? So I'll open it up to the panel. All right. Not at the same time again. Relax. Okay. Okay. All right. Let's see. I'm going to start choosing somebody. Okay.
I can just speak a little bit to kind of what we're doing on our end. Something that we've looked into now, obviously with the current situation that hasn't really come up before, is obvious because a lot of agencies out there do not have a certain level of comfort or the ability to do the multiple choice remotely proctored, or they're not comfortable with the unproctored multiple choice testing. So we've actually put it out there now where we are creating specific exercises, whether they be more on the situational front, not as much performance, and more kind of like a situational type exercise, writing exercises, and so forth, that we're making specifically kind of for this time for agencies to use now, specific to their agencies, and then providing those to them so that they can administer them via something even as simple as a screen share in Zoom. So they're kind of, it's kind of a remote proctor like that, where they then have the candidates turn around and email their test product, if you will, into the department or the agency within a certain time frame, say 15 minutes or 5 minutes after the actual session ends. And then we're also looking at different options that agencies could possibly use to administer those, such as I believe Adobe Connect has a little bit more robust abilities as far as including PDFs, PowerPoint presentations, and kind of like multi-page documents that you might not be able to use with a single screen share via Zoom or something like that. So those are just some of the things we're trying to approach at the current time.
Great. Thank you very much. Joshua, did you raise your hand? Not anymore? Okay.
Oh, no, I think this is just a very new territory for everybody. You know, it's a challenge to take what is traditionally done in person with visuals that you can interact with and do it virtually. And a lot of times performance test settings, they're based on environment and tools and things that may be more difficult to you know, leverage in a virtual setting. That being said, I mean, we're definitely exploring it with some of our clients. We have physical agility tests, you know, we need to decide how are we going to continue doing physical agility tests. We have performance assessment centers, you know, where traditionally they've done some type of physical action in which it is observed and watched now, and with tools and resources that they would have to be in person to have. So I think it's new on the forefront. I'm very interested in what the panel has to say. My internet connection is unstable.
You're okay. You're
probably
okay.
Breaking up, huh? Okay.
No, you're good. You're good.
So, you know, but we're faced with the challenge right now with our fire client. They want to continue services. They are essential function. And so we're brainstorming. So what I can promise to do is, as we know more about how to move forward and what some of those constraints and limitations will be, and maybe some resolution for those, I'll be happy to circle back with Frank and make sure he gets that information disseminated to this group.
Thank you. Tina, did you raise your hand? I can't hear you. I cannot hear you. Tina, let's see. All right.
Sorry, I had myself muted. What comes to mind is the typing test that we used to do that we no longer do as a performance test. We decided years ago that we would not be doing that performance test, that we would ask people for a certification, basically. We researched like what agencies are available that people can go to give us a certificate certifying that they type a certain number of characters. And we discovered that workforce centers offer this service for free. So we were able to forego that test. And this is kind of like a little different take on it, but they basically go on their own to say, you know, we've done this test, and then they give us that certificate, and when they apply for the exam, it's a requirement that they submit that to us. Another thing that we've done in the past for firefighter was, it's called the CPAT, candidate, I can't remember the acronym, what it spells out to, but it's the CPAT, C-P-A-T. We've used that for a number of years, basically allowing the candidates to take the performance tests. Again, this is not like social distancing, I guess, because they actually have to go to a place and do it, but it's not with us. So they may have had been CPAT certified years ago, and then we accept it. And that is a requirement for them to apply for the firefighter exam. The other thing that we're doing right now is doing research on virtual reality testing. We're thinking that there are aspects of certain performance tests that we run that would be conducive to that. One of the things that we're looking at right now is like what we call a pre-trip test that we administer for people who drive different vehicles. So they do a pre-trip inspection of the vehicle, and we think that we can basically test virtually using one of the vendors. We're basically testing this out though. We haven't produced anything, but we have a vision of how this is gonna run. Basically the pre-trip inspection is required of 3 exams that we administer. For instance, it's a refuse collection truck operator, and heavy duty truck operator. So we were thinking of doing that together because the competency model basically speaks toward them being able to share that part of the test part. So we thought that we would create a virtual reality way of testing people by using the goggles. Again, that's before this COVID-19. There is a way to do it without the goggles, is to show it on a screen, and then they have to identify like what is wrong with this picture here, and then we would go through testing them that way. And then they would have to, like, we would have to ask a question like, is the air brake in place, or something like that. So anyway, it's all under development, and I can't speak too thoroughly about it because we're still working with the vendor on it, but the vision is that some aspects of performances can be done virtually, and that's what we're working on.
All right, thank you. A general question that I think it's applicable to all of these types of exams, and a question that I'm looking at the question and platform here and the chat room here. Technological barriers. Now, there's going to be an equity issue now where there's going to be individuals that may not have a working computer, working laptop, and now understanding the circumstances that we're currently in, and we're shifting a lot of our exams to do remote testing, digital, virtual, even virtual reality. I mean, what about those individuals that may not have those resources? What options can we provide? So Jeremiah, you raised your hand, then we'll go to Tina afterwards. Go ahead, Jeremiah.
Yeah, in terms of providing resources for taking the unproctored written tests, we take individuals or give them access to our computer lab if they want to schedule an appointment, come in, use our computer equipment to be able to do that. Now, obviously, our offices are closed to the public, so we're not able to accommodate those requests. What we are trying to accommodate is being as flexible as possible for late administration requests. If individuals are sent unproctored tests and they let the analysts know that fortunately they don't have the equipment to be able to complete the tests on their own, and that they would have tried to complete it either at our offices, at a public library. We're trying to be as flexible as possible with providing them late administrations once our offices do open up.
Great, thank you. All right, Tina.
Okay, so we have, we do administer unproctored tests and proctored tests. So the unproctored tests, we tend to do it for things like T&Es and advisory essays because they are oftentimes questions that are regarding a person's past. So it is a unique, they answer uniquely according to their own experiences as to how they qualify for, you know, this position that they're trying to promote into, for instance. So we do those tests unproctored, and we have basically a lobby in our main building that allows people to take that type of test online themselves in our lobby. It's kind of to the side in our front counter. But we also, they can also take the test at the library or any public place where they offer computers to them. The proctor tests, the online proctor tests, the ones that we remotely proctor online, like I mentioned before, is that because of the equity issue where some people simply don't have the equipment or can't make it at a certain time period, we do allow them to come into our test center and do what we call on-site testing. So at the same time that it's given online at the individual, so we typically open a test for about a week's period of time. And it's a time test. So when people go in, they're given all kinds of instructions. Actually, before they even take the test, they're given instructions and talked about, and we tell them about the procedures, what they need to download in the system, any things that they should watch out for, being in a private location, et cetera, et cetera. And then when they show up, actually when they do take the test, then at the time when they are supposed to take the test, they decide, let's say they don't have the equipment, then we give them an alternative to schedule themselves for on-site testing. So at the same time, people are at home or wherever in a private location taking the multiple choice test during this week's time. At the same time, we are offering on-site testing at our test facility by our building so that they can have the equipment, and then there's proctors there that basically verify their identity, and then they sit down and they take the test online.
So Tina, I have a question for you. Do you do that now, even after all this, or is this what?
Actually, yeah. So we suspended testing because because of the COVID-19 situation, we can't offer the on-site testing.
Yeah.
And we feel like if we can't offer that, we cannot do the online testing remote proctored as well. Now, we've been talking internally about how we can bring people in. So for the multiple choice tests, we've asked our medical services director, like, what is a safe, distance? And we could stagger the room where it's such that they are spread apart. It'll take us longer to finish it though, but because there are only so many people that can fit into the room now, because instead of, let's say 60, now we can only do like 20 in the room. But there is a possibility of us gradually easing, once the peak period is over of this COVID-19, we can think about gradually inviting people in that way, the ones that still want to do on-site testing, and then we can open up online remote testing again. I might be skipping ahead, but interviews, we've had to do a couple of accommodations during this time. What we've done with our interviews is interesting, because what we did was we used Google Hangout basically, or Skype, and we've been able to do a couple of interviews where we have a rater in each interview room separated, and then the candidate at home or in a private location doing the interviews. So that's another way of getting at like social distancing and having the interview done. We don't prefer it that way because it takes a lot of rooms, and it's a little different. The logistics, we just started this, but we don't recommend this for like long term because it would take us forever to finish our interviews this way, to put people in different rooms. But that is a way you can do it.
Great. Well, thank you. Jonathan, okay, and then
Yeah.
then we'll transition to interviews. But Jonathan, go ahead.
Just real quick, if I may, on that. We have heard back from some of our customers, different agencies out there that are still doing a very scaled down version of in-person proctored multiple choice testing. And they're trying to minimize use of the paper, pencil, anything that basically is touched and moved between, person to person. So they're using our online testing proctor system, actually, spacing the candidates out, bringing them no more than groups of 5 or 10 at the very most, putting them spread out across the room, and using the computer. So basically, all they're really touching for the most part is the mouse to click, A, B, C, or D, and then they have the candidates leave the room individually, and are then just kind of sanitizing, wiping down that station before the next group comes. And we've made some recommendations, even as to providing disposable gloves or something, since essentially they're only moving a mouse in there, just to try to kind of increase the comfort level of the candidates as well. So that's something that some of the different districts and agencies that we've talked to are doing right now.
Great. Okay, great. Thank you for sharing all of your experiences and insights with performance exams. We need to now transition to the next segment. It would be now the interviews, and I think Tina already addressed on at least her perspective and her insight about interviews. So I want to motivate some key discussion topics, or at least discussion with these questions. Describe your experience administering remote, live, and or recorded interviews. And then which online platforms do you use for remote interviews? So I'll open it up to the panel. You could just raise your hand, Jeremiah, and start off with you.
Okay, so at County of Los Angeles, we use Rivs as our vendor. Actually, they're now Interview Stream. These are primarily recorded interviews. It's nice to be able to send out a link to candidates to be able to give them a period of time, start and end time where they can record their interview at their leisure, be able to respond to the questions. Questions are recorded and then reviewed by the panelists afterwards. A lot more flexible in terms of scheduling, especially a large number of candidates. To be able to verify their identity, we have them display their photo ID that shows their name and matches, obviously, the candidate application. To be able to manage equity issues, we actually do instruct them to cover up their birth date to be able to ensure the candidates, or I'm sorry, that the panelists don't see their age. The biggest struggle that we have with the recorded interviews, the way that we run it, is if there's any kind of technical issue, either with the candidate's equipment or our vendor is determining where the issue actually occurred, right? Was it the candidate who didn't follow instructions in terms of testing their specs out? If it's an issue that we can verify is with our vendor, then it becomes an issue of, okay, they've probably already been exposed to the question. Now we need to develop equivalent questions and be able to determine, are there any differences in scores across the different interview responses from these candidates? We are getting ready to start with two-way live interviews, also through Interview Stream. This will help kind of alleviate some of those issues with the technical issues, and we won't have to worry about equivalent questions. The recorded interviews, again, the benefit is allowing us to access a large number of candidates, gives us flexibility, and the raters being able to review the responses at their leisure. We do the best of our ability try to get the panelists to come into our facilities so we can control the display of the standards and be able to manage debriefs to account for inter-rater reliability. But obviously that's something that we can't do right now. So that's why we're exploring our two-way live interviews.
Just one thing I want to point out is that as HR professionals, we have our own language, and we say like RIVs, SHL, all these other things. We have a number of people attending that are probably relatively new to this field. So if possible, if you know the acronym or a little bit more about the background of the vendor, if you can explain it a little bit further, because a number of them have said, like, what is that? What does that mean? So one question I have is that how do you maintain security the interview questions with RIVs? So Jeremiah.
Okay, so yeah, RIVs allows you to display the interview questions there on the screen. In terms of security, that's something that is always going to be an issue as far as displaying the question up on the screen, especially if you're giving them a time period to which complete the interview. Let's say we start on a Monday, they have until Friday to be able to record their interview. What's to stop the candidate from sharing the interview questions with their buddy who's going to take the interview later on? That's something that it is difficult to control, and some of our departments that we administer interviews for opt not to use the video interview format, and because obviously of concerns of cheating. Now that we can't do in-person interviews, we're left with the decision: do we wait for the live interviews to be able to commence again, where we can open up our offices and have them in and do the live interviews? Or at some point, do we do what we can to then go back to two-way live interviews and do what we can, especially with a smaller interview group, I think.
Okay. Does anybody else want to share their experiences? Joshua, then Jonathan.
So just adding to what Jeremiah shared, I think one of the ways that you can mitigate the security issue is in the design of your question. Very similar to earlier, one of the panelists was speaking to, hey, we don't do knowledge factual questions in a unproctored environment because it's very easy to Google or talk to people, find answers basically for it. So, in your design of your interview, you should be mindful about, is this just a very specific thing that could be Googled, or is it an application of knowledge? The other thing that we do, because we have, typically we have robust data, is that we can look to see if there are practice effects. It looks like people are doing better as the days are going on with the administration of the interview. We can look to see if there are differences between someone who took it, groups who took it on Monday versus Wednesday versus Friday, right? If you do provide a week worth of time to take the test. I think some other alternative solutions is to literally have different sets of questions like you would do with the written test. I know it's a little bit easier said than done, but have a few different sample questions that way, or forms, interview forms out there. In that way, if somebody, makes shares one of the questions, and someone goes and studies it, then when they go and they actually take their interview on time, they're kind of at a loss. The bottom line is, though, and just so everyone's very clear, there's no way to stop someone from taking a picture of your interview question. If they do that, they're jeopardizing, of course, their position in the process, or their employment opportunity, but they can do that. So I think we just need to start getting comfortable with finding additional ways to mitigate some of those issues, but then also provide and doing some additional testing afterwards to identify if there is any evidence of actual cheating behavior. And there's nothing that stops us from having a follow-up You know, a lot of private sector industries, they do not 1, 2, sometimes even 3 interviews. So if someone, you know, masters a response to a question that was shared, make them touch upon the subject again in another area when they come down to do their hiring interview. I think these are tools that we need to leverage in the state that we are, because the answer that we just stop and hope that this goes away and we can get back to business as usual, you know, I'm not too certain on that.
Thank you, Joshua. All right, Jonathan.
Yeah, not so much speaking to the security concerns there, but more just kind of practicality, just a practical approach. The thing that I've done in the past is conducted the live remote interviews, but not necessarily had to have the panel members and everyone there all signing in at the same time. You do lose a little something as far as possible, like follow-up questions or probes if you allow for that. But you have a staff member or yourself kind of go boom, 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 record interviews with the candidates yourself, and then at a later time, actually send those recordings out to the panel members, get on a different meeting with the panel members, the raters later, do the kind of briefing with, you know, with that, go over kind of your anchors and whatnot, have them watch the interviews, come back together, do briefing with them remotely, virtually as well. So they're not actually having to get there at the same time and take up a full day that's, you know, dedicated to the interview, and actually have them involved at that moment in the live interviews with the candidates. Some other just kind of practical concerns, I think, if we're doing this, since this is the world we're living in, is talk to the candidates ahead of time, give them ideas on what it's going to entail, let them even select the platform if they're more comfortable with one or another, or if they have their own security concerns with one platform versus another. Kind of, I think we can be flexible on that. Can remind them to find a private place and be aware of what's showing up on the screen, so they don't have someone walking in behind them, or, you know, the dog running around as I do here today a little bit, or just kind of so they can kind of get themselves in the right state of mind, and so they're not thrown off by things that might happen or come up in the middle of it. And yeah.
Great, thank you. I would like to open it up for, okay, so I kind of want to create another segment where I open it up for attendees to ask questions directly. So for those of you who want to ask a question, you can raise your hand and I can allow you to talk, and you can ask a direct question to any of our panel members here. So just go ahead and raise your hand, and then I'll allow you to talk. Or you could just type in a question on the Q&A as well. That's fine if you could do that now. So one question, has anyone done a structured Zoom interview or similar? I'll open it up for the panel members. Nobody has done a Zoom interview. How about a Zoom webinar? Has anybody done a Zoom webinar? We're actually participating. Yes, okay, thank you. All right, we got one hand. Okay, I'm gonna allow you to talk. Go ahead, you're live. I'm gonna unmute you. Unmute yourself, please. It's not working. Well, for some reason it's not unmuting. I don't know why, but Christy, go ahead. It's not. I don't know why it's not working.
Hello?
There we go. Go ahead. Go ahead.
Hi, sorry about that. I didn't realize that it was still muted. So my name is Melissa Rayleigh, and I'm actually the HR analyst at Inglewood Unified. And I actually hosted 2 rounds of interviews via Google Hangouts over the past 2 weeks. And the way that I shared my documents with my panel was to, I created a Google Drive called Interview Materials, and I gave them access to view the interview packet and I scheduled my candidates to call in or video conference in by giving them a stated interview time, and I gave them the login information. And so each time they called in, and then I actually proctored and I recorded all the interviews. So once the interviews were actually over, I still did my I did my briefing and my debrief with my panel. And then I deactivated their access to the Google Doc drive so that those materials can still stay confidential. So that's the way that I've hosted them, and they went pretty well. One of the things I liked with the Google Hangout was whenever I had another candidate that was trying, like let's say my candidate tried to call in prior to their time, it wouldn't allow them to because I was still in the interview process with the previous candidate. So that was a good function, but I think that it worked fairly well, and I was still able to get the things out of the interview that I needed, and I was able to do my certification and send it off to my hiring authority.
Great, thank you for sharing, appreciate it. We're at Christine Winslow. Are you able to unmute yourself? No? Okay, I'm gonna let other people allow. So we have AIGNAO. Go ahead, can you unmute yourself and talk, please? Okay, so some people are not able to unmute themselves for some reason. All right. ES Ruiz, go ahead.
Yes, I wanted to ask, does Google Hangouts has the option to record the actual interview?
Does anybody know that answer to that question?
I don't know if it has that option. I don't remember if it had that, but I brought my recorders home from work and I just recorded them while the interviews are taking place. I stayed muted during the entire process and I just recorded them myself.
Another option, just to share this with you, you could do a screen record. You could do Google Hangouts and just be the facilitator and screen record your screen.
Oh, okay. I will use that for the next time. Thank you.
And I'm just a moderator. Okay, so, all right. Who else wants to talk? Let's see. Unmute. Debbie, you're live. Unmute yourself.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, great. My name is Debbie Batchy. I am a personnel analyst with the Escondido Union School District. And I have been doing our qualifications appraisal interviews through Zoom. And one reason we did Zoom rather than Google Hangout is because there is a record feature. And Zoom also has lifted the 40-minute time limit. So what I've been doing is sending out individual appointments to our candidates so we don't have that issue of people trying to get in or join the meeting. And then that also has been helpful because you can name the individual file with the candidate's name. So I've been the proctor and the moderator, and we don't share the questions. We just let them know that we can repeat the question as many times as they might need. And then I send those, it converts into an MP4 file, and I send those out to the interviewer. Sorry, my son just hit his head.
It's okay. It's okay. Thank you for sharing, Debbie. It's a sign of the times that we're living. I mean, I've seen dogs, I've seen cats, I've seen kids. I mean, that's it's an interesting time that we're living in when we get a chance to see a certain side of people now that we normally don't see. So thank you for sharing that, Debbie. All right, any final thoughts from our panel members before we wrap this roundtable up? we'll start just a few thoughts, a few key points. If we start with Jeremiah, go and then we'll just go down the line. Jeremiah, final key thoughts.
Yeah, I think that now's a good opportunity to look at how we can be a little bit more expeditious with our resources, with our processes. Obviously, we hope that we're back in the office and up and running again in the next month or so. But if you listen to the news, sometimes they're talking about it. It may come around again in the fall. So I think that this right now gives us a good opportunity to fine tune our processes for being able to manage everything going forward, and maybe just doing everything better or finding better ways to do everything as it is, as a normal part of our process.
Great, thank you. Jonathan, just a few key thoughts, points.
Yeah, definitely. I agree with Maya right now, and I think perspective, chance, and innovation are kind of the now. I mean, it's a crazy world out there. We just need to focus on ourselves, being safe and healthy, and those that we care about, our families as well. If we have that, that's kind of all we ask for. As you said, this too shall pass, and hope we'll come out with some new ideas and new innovations and be better at. And now's the time to explore those options.
Great, thank you. Alicia?
Yeah, I just want to first thank you, Frank, for inviting Contra Costa County to be a part of this, and just, reiterate what everyone else has been saying, that, we need to be innovative in the way that we're testing candidates during this time. And I think now is a great time, especially if you've had some resistance within your organization, to try to break down some of those barriers and to get into some more innovative ways of testing candidates, not just during this time, but long-term. Because the flexibility that it provides is massive in for the candidates who we're testing, and it gives us the ability not only to test candidates who live in our area, but that live all over the country, which is huge. So
great, thank you. Tina, please, final thoughts.
Just thank you for inviting me. I enjoyed hearing what everyone is doing, and your thoughts and the questions, and I think we're all in it together, and whatever we can do to continue to share our, what we've learned from our experiences, I think it'll help all of us out as human resource professionals.
Great, thank you. Steve?
Just a couple of things. First, thank you for everyone who attended, and thank you, Frank, for putting this together. Just a couple of things that people may be interested in, because it's a whole issue with equity. Is a lot of people do not have the laptops to do remote proctor testing, and so the future is looking at using phones as another way of doing online testing and being recorded in that manner, because I think more people have phones than laptops now. So that's one of the promising things in the future. The other part that I would say, going back to online testing, is that if this is the wave of the future, which I think it will be, I think the city of LA is 95% of all of our exams are online testing, and will be at 100% at some point, is that it does allow for more creative items. We are looking to do situational judgment test items, where essentially you can embed videos and audio and so forth. So there's a lot more creativity when you do online testing. So I think we're fully embracing it, and I think our candidates are headed that way as well. So our goal is to change the climate and culture in the city for testing, and I think in the 3 years we've done a little bit of that, but we're looking forward to that. And like someone mentioned, we may be back here again in a few months, so we definitely need to start working on that now in terms of dealing with this situation.
Thank you. All right, Joshua.
I mean, I feel like I can echo everyone else's sentiments. I think this is a challenging time, but it gives us a lot of opportunity to be innovative. We heard a lot of good discussion today about different various tools that we can leverage. To the point Steve was brought up, mobile devices are becoming a way to conduct interviews. For example, the RIP system does allow you to do your interview on your phone. In addition to that, our vendor is actually already on mobile testing for cognitive and being able to use your phone to do a cognitive ability test right then and there. So I think the time for change is now. And we can see this as a silver lining in our processes maybe. And at the end of the day, just having more tools in our bag to be able to be effective professionals and to do the best for our organizations and get the most qualified people in there. So thank you, everybody. I think we should do this again. I feel like we're gonna have a lot more stories to share in the upcoming weeks.
Yes, very good. Thank you. I would like to turn it over to our president of Personal Testing Council of Southern California, Eugene. Please, please share something with the group.
Yes, thank you, Frank. So I just wanted to start off by saying my name's Eugene Gorenstein. I'm the current president of PTC-SC. I'm also an HR analyst at the Anaheim Union High School District. But I do want to say thank you to everyone who attended. I want to thank all of the panelists for sharing their excellent insight. Of course, I want to thank you, Frank, for putting this together and moderating. I think this has been really helpful for all of us in the field right now. We're kind of in uncharted waters, so to speak, and by coming together, it's going to make it that much easier for all of us to get through this difficult time. But I do believe we will persevere as a community, and the way to do that is by joining forces. For those of you that attended your first PTC meeting, I just want to give you a little bit of background. PTC regularly gets together, and it was founded actually over 60 years ago with the goal of exchanging ideas and discussing the latest trends, and we're continuing that legacy. We usually have a luncheon in person, but of course, because of the times, we move to a virtual setting. Usually there's a fee for non-PTC members to attend, but we waive that obviously because of just the times we're going through. But I just wanted to let you all know kind of PTC's, hoping to do this again and kind of as a follow-up, and also have in-person luncheons again in the future. And then I also want to thank Jonathan from CODESP for partnering with us. I think that this has been really beneficial, and I just want to again thank everybody for coming. And I think it's really successful, and I look forward to doing it again in the future.
Great. Thank you. I just want to wrap it up and say thank you again to our panelists. Thank you, all of you, CODESP, for partnering with us. Eugene, thank you also for those closing remarks. I just want to let everybody know, including our attendees, you're not alone. We're in this together. We're learning as well. We're pilot testing. We're learning. We're becoming more wiser and getting more experience with all these different platforms, different ways of doing this. We're going to see if we can do this again. We're going to share our stories as well, as Joshua indicated. Please, we'll be sending out emails encouraging you to join PTC as well, because this is how we can fully leverage our collective experiences and learn from each other and get through this time, difficult times with the help and support of one another. So I want to thank all of you, the panelists, the attendees. We'll see if we can do this again. Till next time.